All right, happy 4th of July, everybody. I'm Wyatt, and this is my co-host Darren, and we're just going to kind of bounce around today and just, cover a variety of topics. Did you see the Democratic Socialist win in New York? Like they pretty much cleaned house.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is actually okay, I'm glad you brought this up. This is a good topic. So I'm really not a fan of any of the people who won, as you could imagine.
Go figure.
But I do think that's probably where the party is going. I mean, all these people, even some particularly kind of nasty ones, like there's one. Her name is ethnic sounding. Daria Lisa Chevalier or something. I'm sure I am remembering her name wrong. It's something like that. It was like Daria. Oh no, it is Daria Lisa Avila Chevalier, and she's like, I mean, she is just terrible. I mean, she's like a full blown like communist. She had tweets resurface where she was like, she said, I was in a restaurant and there was no napkins to wipe my hands with, so I just used the American flag behind me. Like, literally, like that was something she had tweeted. And it's like, it's like, who hasn't said an edgy joke in the past? But it's like, okay, so you're this like socialist, uh, person running, for this is like a federal post, and and you're talking about wiping your hands on the American flag. I mean, that's very unoptical to say the least. And I would imagine she probably does harbor some resentment against America. So,
Yeah, I mean, if I can for just a second, do you really feel like the American people? I just kind of feel like we're past that pearl clutching about this or that, or oh my God, they said this or they tweeted. I mean, don't is the Trump administration, is Trump not being elected twice not evidence that the American people just could really give a shit less about what radical, unpatriotic, un-American things somebody says? Like, is that, I don't know. I thought that that was pretty well understood in our circles by now.
oh yeah, I think ultimately people are basically past it because I mean, it's not like it's basically out of the news cycle now. I mean, she got her House seat, and people were in uproar for a couple days, and now the uproar is over. They're on to the next, the Supreme Court cases.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what do you think that it means that all these uh, Democratic Socialists are winning? I mean, this has kind of been a movement in New York for honestly as long as you and I have been in politics for decades, right? Like 2 decades at least. And they're just now seemingly gaining steam. Like, why do you think that is? Do you think that this is like a culmination of their efforts? Do you feel like this is just political timing and this couldn't be controlled for? Like, what is your, I don't know, what is your analysis of like why now are all these? And I grant it's just New York, but surely you understand that like this is only going to get bigger from here, right? Because these people are going to win elections. They are going to become more popular, and they're going to desensitize a lot of these socialist policies to the American people, right? And I don't. These people aren't going away. Is my point. But um,
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted. So on one hand, the DSA is really entrenched in New York City. So candidates that you know are Democratic Socialists, they can just perform better in that city than really anywhere else in the country. There are maybe some other, I guess, strongholds you could say where a DSA type person would perform well. I'm kind of thinking like Minnesota, maybe, you know, parts of Oregon. But beyond those like enclaves, I actually don't think that people quite like Daria Lisa Avila Chevalier, for example, would have much of a chance in most other parts of this country. Uh, I do think, however, that broadly as a national trend, Israel criticism will become like a new box to check. Like I think going forward, if you want to be a Democratic candidate that gets a lot of youth energy, you're gonna have to be against Israel. Which, like, I think there were like how many, like three or four elections in New York for House seats and or something, and they were all like against Israel,
Yeah, it was
or at
something
least
like that. Yeah.
yeah, some post or other, and they were all against Israel, and they all won. Yeah, so I think that that is probably the broad national trend. I still do think democratic socialism is kind of niche, and it turns like a lot of people off. Honestly, like a lot of the aesthetics of it and the kinds of things these people say and stand for, not super appealing to a lot of the country. But you, on the other hand, seem to be of the mind that this uh, is going to be like a huge trend going forward. So I mean, do you have kind of like a explain your reason, expound
Yeah,
on that,
sure,
I
sure,
guess.
sure. So like I said this at the top, right? Like I don't think these people are going anywhere. I think they're only going to become more prevalent, right? I guess it's our job to decide whether that's good or bad. I'm into this movement for a number of reasons, right? Or at least I can see the appeal for a number of reasons. One, I think there really is in the Democratic Party, right? Keep that as my framework, okay? There really is a generational problem where we have a bunch of old heads in office who haven't really done much, and they aren't even actively trying to affect change. And I think the Democratic base wants change, like at a fundamental level, right? Even if it's like a rock the boat type of change. And I think they want moral clarity on specifically like U.S. ties with Israel. Like every single one of those DSA people won because they were not able, or the incumbents were not able to show like a clear willing to denounce Israel or the genocide in Gaza or even really the war in Iran, right? Which is like they would say like, oh my gosh, this was stupid, or oh my gosh, Trump didn't go through the right avenues. Like it was a soft criticism of Iran at best, right? And you tie all that in with the affordability crisis and the ability to seem like there is weird disaction. And then I think the final thing that I don't think can be disputed or undercounted is the success, perceptually speaking, of Zoran, right? Because before, uh, Democratic Socialists, like who did they have? They really had Bernie, right? Like even AOC does not really, like I don't know, she doesn't enact a lot of policies, neither does Bernie. But for the first time in like modern American history, we have a democratic socialist who is elected to office, and whether you agree or not, perceptually, it seems like he's doing everything he can to try and deliver on his promises, right? And like I don't know, I don't want to ramble on for too long, but one of the last things I'll say before I kick it back to you is like I don't really think that this is the boogeyman communism, like dark brown jihadism that we're supposed to be afraid of, right? Like, I feel like, if you were to look online right now, like on Matt Walsh or Ben Shapiro or Michael Knowles or Ron DeSantis, like their feed, they think that this movement is like this brown communist global jihadism of foreigners, and like I just feel like that's a silly argument, and I feel like if that argument was being made, like if you were pumping gas and a stranger came up to you and said that, you would be like, wow, this is really strange, please get away from me, right? Like it's incoherent, right? And I think people can see through that. So, um, sorry, go
Well,
ahead.
No, no, you're fine. Well, there's a lot to touch on. Let me touch on the last point first, since it's the most fresh in my mind, and then, if I remember, I want to touch on Zohran and the policies he's
Sure,
enacted thus far.
absolutely.
But in terms of like the jihadist insurgency, um, I will admit that uh, I guess in terms of what this kind of new generation of DSA left, more lefty insurgents are saying, uh, I will say it's less offensive than what was happening in the woke 1.0 era. I do think the leftists, especially leftists running for office, have taken note that woke 1.0 will no longer work and that white people broadly are getting tired of like the Ibram X Kendi books and like the abolish whiteness stuff. So I think that's out. All of these people supported that stuff back when it was in vogue. Now, though, they won't come out and say it explicitly because it's no longer politically expedient. But I do think it ultimately is in their hearts still. So I do think that in some ways, my enemy, which would be like Zohran Mamdani, has become more dangerous because now they're not making themselves explicitly known as my enemy. They're not explicitly saying that they are in opposition to me. And instead, especially in the case of Zoran, they're approaching me with a smile on their face when I do think they ultimately have ulterior motives, evil motives, in fact. For example, I don't know if you saw this, but when Zoran was running to be governor, his website said he wanted to take money from white neighborhoods and give it to black neighborhoods. And then he kind of walked it back and said, well, the white neighborhoods have money, and, the black and brown neighborhoods have less. So it's more of just a statement of fact and less so of race. But ultimately, he did frame what would have been a race neutral policy and he racialized it. So I do think that Zoran does harbor like extreme racial resentment against whites. He's just not going to explicitly say it anymore because it's not wise to do so. Uh, w- you know, so I think for that reason, I do think, uh, for the Ben Shapiro types, crying about a jihadist insurgency, even though Ben Shapiro has his own ulterior motives, I think to a degree, he is right. I mean, like these people are a threat to me. They're a threat to white Americans. I do think so. I do think there is cause for concern. But before I hit on Zoran in particular and his policies, some of his recent policy enactments. Do you have anything to say about what I just said?
Yeah, if you don't, I would just love to rehash one of the things you said, which is that, like, listen, like Zoran is basically doing the opposite of what Democrats normally do, and normally they're all out there with the race-based politics and blah 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 blah, and then whenever they get in there and they enact policies, it's pretty colorblind, right? But you're saying that Zoran is out there like charming, he's smiling, he's kissing babies, he's really good at politics, he's really good at speaking to people, and you think underneath there is a deep resentment for white people. Did I get that basically right? Is that fair to say before I go on?
Basically, right. Though I will say, I don't think Democrats ever hid their hatred for white people. I think Zoran is though.
Right, right. No, that's what I'm saying. If I may have misspoke, but yeah, like Democrats normally like very, very open, but now you're saying that now that he's in office, he carries this deep anti-white resentment. I just, I, I just disagree. Is I think the best way to put it. I don't think you can look at Zoran and look at his executive agenda and like what he's targeted to do and come to the conclusion that he is a race-based politician. I just don't. I think that he is very colorblind in a lot of the executions of what he's done. He's made some pretty foul comments here or there, but I mean, like I think we've pretty well established that Americans don't really care as much about that stuff like they used to, right? And that's fine. Um, but yeah, I just think that, and this is the last thing, and then I'll kick it back to you. We can deep dive Zoran more. I just think that the rhetoric that you use, that like he's dangerous and he's threatening and he's anti-white, I just think that this rhetoric just generally, dude, it's just not helpful. Like at the end of the day, like Zoran is a part of a political movement that represents tens of millions of people, including white people. And I think this rhetoric of like, oh my gosh, they're anti-white and they're the gray threat to America and like they're going to cause the collapse and we have to do everything we can to keep them from holding power. I just don't see it. I just don't see it, dude. I really don't. I mean, this is a movement that's been around for 30 years, right? Or 20 years. It's not going anywhere, and it's only going to get bigger. So I think we have to figure out a way to create a movement, like from your perspective, right? If you don't want these people holding power, you have to create a way that minimizes blowback politically. So that's my 2 cents, right? Like you should want a Trump administration that isn't so incompetent that people are looking to Zoran's model for solutions. That's what you should want. But
I don't know. I mean, to that point, I do agree. I think a lot of the blame, honestly, I put a lot of the blame at Trump's feet. I mean, it's his own incompetence that has made people turn to Zoran. So a lot of the blame goes to Trump. This whole Iran war debacle that we're still in, that's just given tons of ammunition to this new breed of left wing politician. I think they hide behind the Israel issue so that they can sneak their unsavory left wing politics in, and it's kind of like a lubricant, I guess, the anti Israel issue, and then they
right,
can force,
but you
and
don't
then
think
they can.
you would acknowledge that Zoran and co, they are substantively against Israel, right?
I don't know, actually. I mean,
Really?
I don't know that Zoran is a true anti Zionist. I mean, or if he is, I think he'll pay it lip service. I mean, do you really think if Netanyahu came to New York that Zoran would have the balls to like
No,
arrest him?
no, I don't. I really don't.
Yeah, and
But
furthermore, I mean, like
if I
all
may,
the.
oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
okay, okay.
I mean, just like you said that, right? You don't actually think Zoran is this, deep intellectual that has this, deep thought out argument about like Marx versus Lenin, or like he wants to, take away all the private wealth and he wants to create a vanguard of the proletariat. Like, you don't view him as this intellectual communist, right? Like, this is just some guy who is, using this, basically he means like center left political ideology, right? Not necessarily communism or even socialism for that matter, right? Um, like he's not enacting these, right? Like this is more of like campaign slogans and marketing than it is substantive communism or socialism. Is that fair?
Well, to that I will agree. I mean, I don't think I doubt Zoran has read Capital by Marx, and I doubt a lot of these people have read Capital by Marx. Frankly, I think Marx would hate these people. But
On that
nevertheless,
we agree. On that we agree. But
nevertheless, though, I mean, he's kind of, I guess, appropriating. I don't know if you would even call it the aesthetic of Marxism, but he wants to brand himself as such.
sure. Um, I also before I will let you deep dive Zoran in just a second. But I am interested in this because it seems like we kind of agree, but maybe not because I wouldn't think you would agree with this. But like I don't know, my political calculus has kind of shifted because I used to not believe in this idea of like blowbacks, like the idea or like the pendulum swing is what they call it sometimes. Is that like you get a far left president and then you get a super far right president, and it just goes back and forth and further, right? Um, I'm starting to kind of become more sympathetic to this understanding of politics because I don't think and here's why. I don't think a Zoran could have won any other time but right now, right? I don't think he could have won against an incumbent like, de Blasio or Bloomberg, right? Or even an old Cuomo, right? Like New York Titans or even Giuliani, right? Like I think his only ability to win was now when all the anti-Israel uh, positions were going to do him favor. And that's only because of what we've seen in the war and all that. And then furthermore, I don't think he would have won in a, stable Trump economy either. I think he could have only won in a situation like now where it's complete fucking chaos administration and it's not helping affordability, right? So I don't know. I said a lot there. Maybe it was completely incoherent, but I just kind of wanted to see what your thoughts were on like, is he a symptom of like right now of the times, or do you see this as like a long time coming for the DSA?
No, I agree. I think he is a symptom because you know what distinguished him in the campaign, if you remember, really was his answer about Israel, and it wasn't even that hard a line. It was just like I think Palestinians should have the same right as the Israelis. And to my point, or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember perfectly, but uh, I even remember other things he said back then. Going back to my point that I don't think he's even an ideological anti-Zionist. I mean, one of his buddies, Brad Lander, who was also running for governor at the time, he gave an answer like, "I believe, you know, Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state." But that the Palestinians deserve dignity, something along those lines, some nonsense answer that basically still affirms Jewish supremacy. But it's like a crypto Jewish supremacist statement, so it was well thought out. Uh, Anyways, I mean, Brad Landers is best buddies with Zohran. He doesn't see Zohran as a threat. Zohran isn't some ideologue. I mean, he's just some resentful. I mean, truly, this is how I see Zohran. He is resentful. He's an opportunist. He ultimately I truly do think he just wants to take money away from white people. Going back to my point that he's not even a real Marxist. I mean, because his policies are not Marxian.
Well, on that we certainly agree, right? Now, in terms of whether he's anti-white, whatever the fuck that means, I wouldn't even say he's as culturally woke as fucking Nancy Pelosi, dude. Like that's where I'm like that 2018 to 2022 era. You know what I'm talking about? I'm like that's nothing compared to Zoran. You know what I mean? Listen, I'm not even the biggest like, oh my God, I can't get enough of this guy. This good looking northern I don't know if he's Arabian or if he's, not white, right? He's charming, has a big smile, knows how to talk to the cameras, knows how to treat the media, right? I just can't imagine that your takeaway from this guy is that like he's got a lot of anti-white sentiment and he needs to be taken care of politically. And I'm just like I couldn't disagree more, honestly.
I've done my deep dive into him. I've looked into things that he's said in the past, things that were on his website, and it's something that only somebody that is driven by resentment would write or would include in their website. I think I have his number, but
Fair enough.
maybe maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I doubt it. Maybe he'll have a pro-white policy at some point. I'd like to see it. But going to one policy which was enacted
Sure.
recently, which I bet you'd like to talk about, the rent freeze. Did you see this?
Yes, and I have mixed feelings about rent freezes, but go on.
Well, it affects, to my understanding, it only affects already rent stabilized apartments, but now for 2 years, the rent level those apartments are at will remain the same. Uh, Obviously, because I mean, okay, this is gonna sound like really like snooty, but I mean, this is just how it is. I understand economics, like Econ 101. I'm not saying my economics understanding is, vast or like impressive, but I do have Econ 101 pretty well nailed down. So, for that reason, I do oppose rent freezes. And I think pretty much every economist ever opposes rent freezes. Any serious economist, that is. And the majority of economists are still, liberal academics. It's not like it's like this ultra right wing uh, profession to be an economist. I mean, these are for the most part all very normal people with pretty center politics. It's pretty unanimous that a rent freeze is bad and will only do harm in the long term. So it's just insane to me that in the big year 2026, we still, I mean, people are still wanting to push for rent freezes. So I don't know. I'm not a fan of it, but I mean that's what the people voted for. Let them have it.
Right. I mean,
It's in New York. It
if
doesn't affect me.
I
So
mean, if I may, right, give an assessment of this, right? Like, a this was a campaign promise, right? I think you would be hard pressed to say that he won on the back of his anti-white agenda. I feel like it was mostly his moral clarity on Israel, and then more importantly, the affordability, right? Which you may read anti-white into that, but just stay with me for the sake of argument. And
mm,
so, like, let's talk about like the obvious pros to this, right? Because I think ultimately, like, for any policy, there's going to be like, who does this benefit disproportionately, and who does this hurt disproportionately, long term, short term, right? This is an immediate relief to the tenants, right? Like the vast majority of New Yorkers, where rent is, for lack of a better word, like out of fucking control, right? Now, if you look at like who this does not benefit, the obvious concern is the landlords, right? Because like their argument would be, and the economists that you love to wrap your lips around their colon of, they would argue that like, listen, if you freeze rent and operating costs go up, so this is everything, this insurance, fucking, I don't know, utilities, maintenance, all that shit, right? If it continues to rise, then this is going to make it less profitable and less people are going to want to be landlords. And it's going to, in the long run, right? It's going to hurt the amount of available housing, and then it's going to drive rent through the roof naturally, right? Is that like, I feel like that's a pretty fair assessment.
yeah, yeah, that's a pretty good rundown of the reason why.
Okay. Here's why I don't give a fuck about any of that. One, I can give a fuck about landlords for the most part. I understand that they're like, I don't know, it's almost like a virus that has you have to have to live, you know? I understand that we have to have that, but here's the thing. They're not going to leave New York City, right? They're just going to make less money because A, there's nowhere left to build in New York. There's just not. So the idea that it's going to slow down new landlords is just in my mind overcalculated in the case of New York. If you tried to do that in Oklahoma City or in Nashville where there's plenty of fucking room, that would be very different because they're constantly expanding those cities. They have not reached their maximum capacity. But in New York, where the fuck are you going to build more shit? you know? So they're saved from that, but it does tweak with the market. You're not wrong there, but I think it basically like the problem was is that it was pricing native New Yorkers out of the city. And how could you, as somebody who's like a big fan of this, ball cap, live in America where you grew up, right? How are you going to deny that to the native New Yorkers?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is a shame that native New Yorkers are, basically being priced out of their own homes. And I would love for them to be able to stay there to, like maintain that social fabric and that cultural history. But I mean, ultimately, I don't think a rent freeze is a way to do it. Now, you did mention, and, I think there's some merit to this, that there are just, I guess you could call it structural or geographical, maybe, issues that preclude more housing from being built in New York. I mean, ultimately, they kind of are at capacity. You could probably build. I mean, you could definitely build more units, but you can't build them as quick as you could out in Oklahoma or Arkansas or wherever in the flyover country. There's no denying that. So on some level, you almost can't even build your way out of the problem because it would be too cost inefficient. You know, it would be too. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of problems with that. On the other hand, though, I just really think that if you don't live in a rent stabilized apartment, and you gotta think, I mean, these people living in rent stabilized apartments, they live pretty cushy lives. I mean, these apartments are pretty cheap, even for someone. It's something I could afford as a person making a Oklahoma wage. So, uh, I do think it is unfair to the other inhabitants of New York that don't have this privilege. But it's going to raise the rents of everyone else. So, I mean,
Sure.
these people in the stabilized apartments, they get a reprieve, but anyone else who doesn't live there, who isn't a native New Yorker, perhaps, but maybe moved there for work because they wanted to increase their lot in life, or, they got a job at Goldman Sachs or wherever, something that you can find in New York. Well, now they're screwed. So, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, life is a zero sum game. So whenever somebody benefits, somebody else will likely suffer. So I mean that it's just who do you want to help out and who do you want to punish ultimately.
Yeah, and I would just argue that the rich landlords are the ones that are going to hurt from the most. Now, listen, I'm open to this experiment, if you couldn't tell. Like, let's see. And listen, I am skeptical, just like you, that this is not ultimately in the long run just going to make the problem worse. But I'm at least open to letting this kind of play out, right? Because, I mean, I don't know. We've heard a lot of stuff economically, right? Like you remember, like when we were in college, they made it sound like nature allowed for 6% unemployment, and if it goes below that, dude, the freaking sky starts falling, horses start flying through space, like it's crazy shit happens when we go below 6%, and then Trump does it, and then it's like, oh, look at that, the nothing crazy's happening. That's kind of how I feel about this, right? Like if we go through this experiment and we see that this is just making the problems 10 times worse, then I got news for you. A Republican will once again become the mayor of New York City, and then they will undo these policies, right? I mean, it's not unrealistic for that to happen, right? Um, the worst case scenario for you, right? And this was what I should have said at the top of the hour is if they're using this branding of socialism and communism, even as that one girl who you referenced earlier was, right? And what if their policies work, Darren? Or what if there's minimal blowback to the average citizen? Or even if there is perceptually low blowback? Well, then you're fucked, my friend. You know what I mean? The worst thing that can happen from your perspective, at least according to my calculation, is that like all of these, democratic socialist branded people start getting real political wins because then the movement can gain traction. So I don't know. What do you
Yeah,
think of
I
that?
mean, I I don't fear that their policies will be effective because I think ultimately they will cause harm. I do fear, however, that the perception will be that they were a success, and then this kind of stuff does get popular. Uh,
Well,
so, I mean, that
I
is a
mean,
concern of mine.
well, in politics, surely by now, you and I can understand that perception is reality in politics, right? Like, it doesn't matter what is true or what is not true, right? And we live in a post-truth era, so
Oh yeah, I mean
you know,
certainly, yeah.
so I don't know. I think you're if you don't see how this movement could gain traction as the old guard kind of gets booted out, right? I don't know what to tell you because this is basically an internal civil war in the Democratic Party. Like this is like a Tea Party movement for the Democrats. This is what I've been waiting for this. So even though I'm not perfectly aligned with it, I'm kind of on board with it because it just means new blood who are actively trying to solve problems. That's really all I want. New people in there that are gonna actively try and solve shit, even if I don't 100% agree with them.
Yeah, I mean they certainly want to solve the problems. I mean I think the way in which they do it ultimately will just cause more. But I mean, for all I care, truly, just let them try it. Let them try it because it's not my home city. It doesn't affect me. Ultimately, the outcome will be bad, as history shows. And look, I mean, I didn't vote for it. It won't affect me. I'm over here in Oklahoma sitting pretty. So, all the people who made their bed, they can enjoy the consequences for all I care. I mean, I go for it, Zohran, go for it. Freeze the rent by all means. I throw my hands up. I say let them do it.
Which is fair. Well, then let me ask you this, and then we can move on to something else. Or if you feel like this is a good spot to wrap it up on it too, is do you think that this movement, this DSA movement, or this Democratic Tea Party movement, do you think it ultimately like falls flat on its face, or do you think that there's a chance that this movement gains serious traction?
I think for the short term, it's going to have some traction, but ultimately, I do think it will fall flat. I think when the policies fail, I think when the politicians prove that they're fundamentally not anti Zionists in any real committed or ideological sense, I think people will see through the lies. Similar with how they've done with AOC. She's slowly falling out of favor. She still has her celebrity status, but I think nationally she's not the rock star people once perceived her to be. And I think her along with the rest of these DSA lefty types, I think they'll fall out of favor, and maybe they'll still perform well in New York, but they won't be a national threat. I think the rest of the country will be immunized against it. That's where I think it'll be. But how about you? You think this will be a huge national trend?
Yeah, I think that there really is a palette for this in the American left wing movement, right? Not just like far left, right? But like even like the center left or the left of center people, I think they want new blood, and I think they want actionable politics, and I think the last thing, like I said, is moral clarity on a few issues. So I think the good news for you is that I feel like that's going to be mostly post woke, and it'll turn into something that you will hate even more. I don't know what that'll look like, but I'm sure you will still hate it nonetheless. And I'm joking around, but I do think that this is a durable movement because now they are going to start to have people that they can point to for success. So like whether you agree with it or not, right? They can point to, Zoran and they can talk about, oh, look at what Zoran did, right? And as long as they can spin it, right? Then who gives a shit, right? Politically speaking, right? And I think that there is, like I said, a generational problem in the Democratic Party. And so there is this want for something new, something to shake things up. And part of my calculation as well is that on the assumption that the Trump administration is just going to continue to be a bunch of bumbling drunk idiots running the single greatest empire known in the history of mankind. Um, I think that that will do a lot more favors than any win Zoran could ever provide, because the level of incompetence that we are seeing from this administration is something that cannot be ignored. And I think it is going to motivate people to get behind whatever political movement the left throws, whether it's moderate centrist Democrat, Joe Biden, baseball, America, or if it's far left Zoran stuff where it's all about affordability and we got to make help things out for the working man and all that, right? So I don't know.
Well, on that point, you have no disagreement from me. Trump will be these people's biggest boon for sure.
Okay, fair enough. And again, I didn't used to believe all that stuff about like I kind of thought that each internal party was kind of controlling their own destiny in some sort. But the more I've thought about it, um, I think that there is such a thing as blowback, politically speaking. So, um, like I don't think the Republicans would have ever let Trump win if they had a crystal ball and they could decide, then they would have never let the guy win. But he happened to be, whether you want to call it an accident of history or a response to the people who became politically engaged for the first time, whatever. It's no mistake, from my understanding, that he got in. He got in because there were people that were willing to rock this fucking ship that we call America. And they didn't care really what it looked like, or they didn't care if this guy was ideological. They just wanted something different. So, Darren, I'm sure as you saw, right, because you're an educated man, that there was a really, I mean, just like there is every single June, there is a like giant volume of Supreme Court cases that just came out. Um, I don't know. Were you shocked by any of these, or are there any that you were like, "Whoa, what the fuck?" But I don't know. Just your thoughts overall.
Uh, well, I'm disappointed, as you can imagine. Obviously, I would have loved for them to have upheld Trump's birthright citizenship executive order, but I kind of knew it was coming when there were no like barricades put up like around the around the national mall or whatever, like uh because if they were going to, because like around Roe, remember when they overturned Roe v.
Even
Wade and
before the leak, right? Even before the leak for Roe,
oh
there
yeah,
was
they
there was
had the
mass
fencing.
exactly. Because some clerk somewhere at a dinner leaked that they were going to overturn it, and then people knew, right? But sorry, I didn't
Oh
mean to cut
yeah.
you off. But go ahead.
No, you're fine. I mean, yeah, so same principle applies. If they were going to overturn it, I mean, they would have had to have way more defenses erected, I would imagine, because it would affect, I assume, way more people. Or well, yeah, probably more people. I mean, anyone here illegally or here, or is sympathetic would probably be out in full force. So yeah, I'm disappointed, but at the same time, it's like, okay, we're really just back to where we were before the executive order. Uh, and, I think anybody pretty much knew, the executive order would not stand it. I don't know. I'm very mad at Amy Coney Barrett. She is Trump's worst Supreme Court pick. I don't know. He totally squandered it on her, but You know what? At least in another ruling, we have.
Well, really quick, really quick, really quick, if you don't
Oh
mind.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I would love because I am fascinated with this sensation that Amy Coney Barrett has kind of drawn up online. And if I'm going to steel man the position, right, from a conservative perspective, and you can be the judge of this, it's that like, listen, she was really good for the first year or two of her, job. And then once she overturned Roe, she very quickly became like from like a firm right of center position on the court to now like just a centrist to like a right of center, right? So you wouldn't take her back, right? You would just say that she's been disappointing, right?
She's been disappointing. Uh, and there have been other cases where she has not. She's obviously too much of a free thinker. I'll say that. I want more of a partisan. I'll be honest, and I know that probably sounds a certain way, but yeah, I want a partisan. I want somebody who's going to like Clarence Thomas. I want another Clarence Thomas. He's great. Uh, yeah, I mean, and on the other hand, like Roe v. Wade, my thinking has really changed. I've got to say, I'm, I'm in favor of their decision on Roe v. Wade. I think it makes sense. I do think abortion is wrong, but to me, the birthright citizenship decision is far more consequential for the future of our nation than the Roe v. Wade decision. I Far more important, and it had the potential to be something that would really just change the direction of our country for years to come. And it was a squandered opportunity. So, I mean, like now people have to cross. You know, now you know, instead of getting an abortion in their home state, people drive 5 hours and get an abortion in the state next door. So it's really not changing anything.
Right. And it also, at least like from my understanding of the data, hasn't really decreased abortions actually. Like oddly enough. Like we've been on a pretty smooth decline for a long time. And then as soon as they overturned the decision, I don't know what you would call that effect, right? But there has been a increase in infant mortality and abortions. So it's just very interesting, right? But I do find this particular thing interesting because, Amy Coney Barrett is basically the end result of what was like a 40-year political project by Mitch McConnell, right? So like he spent his entire life's work as a pro-lifer who was trying to push that agenda down through the Supreme Court because that's who ultimately he thought was going to be able to make this call, right? And if you're a pro-lifer, that's great, right? And I'm sure, and when I say pro-lifer, I mean like the single issue will only vote Republican because they're the pro-life party pro-lifer. I don't mean you who like yes, you are pro-life, right? But you also understand there is a litany of other things that are more important, right? Um,
Oh yeah.
but I do think it's interesting that people are shocked by this because, really the one of the few things like yes, the 6-3 lean is conservative, but they fragment on important issues in very different ways. So, I'm not at all shocked by this, but I just I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here. But I guess to get back on the issue of birthright citizenship, right? You are for it for like political reasons, right? You wouldn't say that the merits of the case were worth a damn, right?
Yeah, they really didn't build a strong case, and that's on Trump, partially. I mean,
I mean,
he has this.
basically, I mean, my understanding of this, I mean, we have a 14th Amendment, right, that grants birthright citizenship, and we have an executive order, and three of our Supreme Court justices chose to side with the executive order over the Constitution, right? I mean, I don't know how else to explain it other than that's just fucking crazy, right? Like the whole job of a Supreme Court justice isn't to overturn an amendment, right? I mean, the 14th Amendment is almost as clear as like the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, right? Like I
Oh
I
yeah.
I can't imagine anyone arguing this. Like all the pearl clutching I see over this, and people are like the collapse of our country is coming and da 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 da. And I'm like, this was the standard. This was the status quo. Like this is not going to be why we fall. But you know
Yeah,
it.
exactly. This is where we were before 2025. So,
This is where we've been since 1890. Like
yeah,
this is a
exactly.
130 something year old precedent. Now listen, you could make the case for, political reasons, cultural reasons, economic reasons that like listen, this was an outdated form of the Constitution and we need to make, adjustments to meet the needs of our current society. But A, those arguments don't matter to a Supreme Court justice. They matter to like a congressman, right? Or a president who's trying to set his agenda. And I don't know what the fuck else is the court supposed to do, you know? But
Yeah, I mean, I guess, there's like the textualists and the originalists, and, there's some other ways of interpreting it. If you're just going off the text, well, it is pretty unambiguous. I mean, you really can't read it in another way unless you're just taking outside context, which like an originalist, I if I'm understanding the definitions of these interpretations, an originalist might, take some context and be like, okay, it was for freed slaves, so the spirit of the law is really for maybe that select group and maybe not an anchor baby. And so for that reason, we should uphold the executive order. And to me, that is, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. But I mean, I will give I will still man the opposite side. I mean, if you're reading the text, it's pretty hard to read it any other way. So, unless you're taking a certain interpretation or you're just being partisan, there's really no other reason to rule opposite. I mean, yeah, and
right.
and look, I think the decision ultimately was a bad one. I think this is bad for the country, the type of people that do birth tourism or illegal aliens. This is not, having babies and, anchor babies. These are not the kind of people you want having birth in the country. I mean, it's not exactly elite human capital. So, I mean, it's bad. Uh, I understand why they ruled this way, and I'm not shocked by it. I'm just sad that I ever got my hopes up in the first place, I guess.
I mean, listen, if there was going to be a court that was going to do it, it was definitely going to be this Supreme Court. Um, because I mean, we've never really had a slant quite like this, at least not in our lifetime. But um, yeah, I mean, I do honestly wonder. I mean, does this give Trump a cop out? Because it's not like the immigration issue is something that he's like substantially provided on. Like there, and and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like I thought that the vision for a lot of the immigration hawks was a closed border, and then we're going to deport the people that are already here in the number of millions, right? Like, like we were promised mass deportations, and we really haven't seen any at the level that I think that there is a desire for, which is, good if you're a Democrat and you're pro-immigration and all that. But I don't think this ruling was stopping Trump from executing this, right? Because this is more of a way to like denaturalize, right? So, I can't imagine how horrible this precedent would be. I mean, I want you to just imagine, right? Left wing Democrat comes into office and he has the power to denaturalize citizens, right? I mean, the right would lose their minds, right? So, whether they would choose, Israeli dual citizens or white nationalists or supposed white nationalists, the big boogeyman, right? But I just can't imagine a world where this could have been a justifiable position to hold. So, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Ultimately, no matter what would have happened, Trump. I mean, as you were saying, Trump really didn't even have the will to act on it. So even if uh, I got the decision I wanted, the deportations wouldn't have gone up, and by any considerable margin. Trump is not that guy, despite many people thinking that he is. I mean, he just doesn't have it in him to deport a bunch of people or really go after people. So ultimately, I think I really for that reason it's like I can't even be that mad because it's like even if we got this decision, I'm like, okay, well, what really would have even changed, especially during this presidency? I mean, Trump is just totally useless. Oh, nearly totally useless.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I just yeah, and it wasn't all like tears for the you know, uh like the immigration hawks, right? Because you did get the lift on temporary protective status, right? Wasn't that another one?
Yeah, I think that applied to Haitians and Syrians. I think that was decided yesterday, and that was a good decision because the natural disaster and you know that afflicted Haiti. Well, that is over. It's been over. The Syrian civil war is over. Now they have uh, Al Shara in there, previously of Al Qaeda.
Previously
So
of
it's
Al
safe
Qaeda is
now.
crazy. Right.
It's safe for them to go back now. So yeah, it was time. I think. I mean, I'm sure a left winger would be opposed to it, but I mean, these people can't stay here forever. They have to go back, and this was more than an appropriate time. It was long overdue, especially in the case of Haiti. That earthquake happened. I don't even remember when it over a decade ago. I mean,
Right.
I feel like I was a little kid when it happened, but I might have my dates wrong. I don't know.
Yeah.
Syrian civil war, though, it only recently kind of ended. So to me, that one, to me, this was an appropriate time.
Yeah, and it's really weird because I don't know if you've seen a lot of the pushback, but now it's like the Republicans in Ohio that are defending the right of the Haitians to be there. You know what I mean? So they're defending the right to be there despite the fact that this is kind of what Trump ran on was this like immigration hawk and they're literally eating the dogs, right? And I just think it's really interesting that now they're coming out of the woodwork to be like, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do if you remove 310,000 of our workforce?" Um well, I'm sure you still agree with it. You're like, yeah, listen, like I'm sure they might be decent people, but at the end of the day, like America's for Americans, right? So,
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, also it's like these people, even if on some personable level, maybe they're nice, or maybe they even conduct themselves in otherwise, you know, good ways, or salubrious ways. I mean, they're a net drain, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. They're a net negative. So and the only reason the Republicans support this is because they want slave labor. I mean, let's be for real. They just want these Haitians here that'll take a low wage, and if they act up or get uppity, they can call ICE and be like, "Oh, this person actually should not be here." So, they
right.
had these protected statuses they had were on like what 18-month intervals. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be renewed. So,
Yeah, and here's what I really don't understand now, and not to stay too much on immigration. I'm sure the audience knows our feelings by now, but I mean, I don't understand why there hasn't really been an attempt to legislate a lot of this, right? Like, I mean, this was something that he could have fought for legislatively, and so are a lot of the other like we haven't had a change in law, right? We've only had a change in policy, which could just be changed by the next president, whether he's JD Vance or whether he's Gavin Newsom, right? I don't understand why he wouldn't get these Democrats on the record because this is an issue that he is dramatically popular on. I know like popular for Trump now means like in the mid 40s, but this is still an issue that this is probably still his strongest issue, right? And I, if I was a Republican strategist, why would you not dare, Bernie Sanders, like the Labor Democrats, right? The union backers to vote against this, the AOC types, right? Why would you not like dare them to vote against these immigration laws? Because at the end of the day, the immigration laws like Republicans are the traditional backer of immigration because, like you said, they get slave labor, right? Now it seems to be Democrats for some, I don't know, feel good culture reason. I don't even know, but it's not out of economic interest, right? Like that's not the Democrats are typically the ones like that are a stumbling block for that, actually. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Your thoughts?
I think it's multifaceted. The reason, some of it is anti-white resentment. Some of it is they feel guilty and have like white guilt, or and some of it is like some true suicidal humanitarianism. Uh, some of it probably stems from Christianity, I would imagine. It's multifaceted, but misguided all around, I would say. Yeah, I mean, just the people from the people from Haiti, they are not net contributors. So, I mean, that should be more than reason enough to deport as
Right,
many
but you're
as you
not.
can.
I feel like you're, and I didn't want to bring it up, but like you're not opposing these Haitians because they're a net economic drain, right?
Well, they're a net drain economically, culturally.
Right. Well, that. Listen, and look, I'm not accusing you of this, but I feel like a lot of this immigration stuff and a lot of these like hawks, like especially in this administration, their immigration policy seems to be coming from an area that is like, you know, pro-white, wink wink, white nationalist, right? Like, their idea of an American citizen, and like this is why they oppose birthright citizenship because like I don't know if people know this, like you and I are birthright citizens. Every single person who's a citizen is a birthright citizen, right? That's how we have done it forever. But what they're really talking about whenever they say like, oh, we want an end to birthright citizenship, what they really mean is that we have a view for America, and that America is wink, wink, nod, nod, white, and um, economics be damned, right? Because I think if you were trying to make an economic argument that these people are a drain, I think that you would not be able to really make that argument credibly.
No, I think you can. Even, I mean, look, I mean, they do supply slave labor to local businesses and even large corporations, but I mean, you got to think these people, they clog up like the ER, they use up services. You got to think of the house. Many of them are given housing, public housing. Many of them are on welfare in some form or other. Their children go to public schools, which, obviously paid for by the taxpayer. The list goes on and on. Uh, and there have been studies done. I mean, in terms of what these people take versus, what they put in, they are, I imagine they are great cogs in the machine for whatever factory they work at. But at the end of the day, like you look at like taxes paid versus taxes, or tax money taken out to pay for services, it's just a net negative. So I mean, economically, I think that's the most metric driven, objective thing we can look at and say, okay, these people as a group are a strain. And then culturally, that one is more, I guess, intangible. But I mean, nevertheless, I do think, the way, the frequency with which Haitian migrants display antisocial behavior is higher than migrants of other nationalities. So I think that is a factor. Maybe not as compelling as the economic factor, but I mean, I do think it's a factor and one I definitely do care about.
Hmm. Well, that's very interesting, but for the sake of time, I will just move on. Did you have any other cases that stick out to you? The only one that I really have after this is the mail-in ballot one. I was curious what you thought of that.
Mail-in ballot one. Okay, yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's where if it's postmarked before election day, so like if you put it in the PO box the day before, but it doesn't arrive till 3 days later, well, it's still going to be counted. But if you mail one in 3 days after election day, and then it arrives on the day after, that one will not be counted. Basically.
Yeah, I mean, more or less. I mean, it basically just obtain or remains the status quo, which is that, like, if you're a veteran in, say, I don't know, Qatar or the UAE, right, or Saudi Arabia, and you mail in a ballot before election day, it's allowed to arrive after the election day and still count, right? Um, I think the reason, listen, it's in case it's not fairly obvious, the reason that this was pursued by the administration is because Democrats prefer mail-in voting and they want to inhibit that, obviously, right? They want to make it harder to vote because they have the rural counties where it's easier to vote in person, and Democrats vote in the urban counties where, voting lines can be 4, 5, 6 hours. And they wanted to make it harder and they wanted to make it more inconvenient because they thought it would, benefit them at the ballot box. That's basically what it came down to. And I understand that from a political perspective, but I just can't. I mean, I don't know. What is your opinion on the merits of this broadly? Because, like, I don't really see a point in limiting the franchisement of people based on, like, you know, if that, as long as you send in your ballot before, like, what the fuck's the problem? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings on the merits of it. I imagine that for the that well, I know for the most part, mail-in voting is secure. I do think, obviously, since there's kind of like you're kind of losing the chain of custody a little, I do think it is more fraught than in-person voting. So there probably is some potential for fraud, not like an extreme amount. Ultimately, though, I oppose mail-in voting the most just because it, benefits my opponent. Ultimately, I mean, it, the only reason to oppose, true reason to oppose it for me is purely political. I mean, it might be a little more fraught than in-person voting, but how much fraud really occurs, I'm sure it's not enough to move the needle. So that's kind of
it's
where I'm
yeah,
at.
it's really not even close, to be honest with you. Really not even fucking close. Okay, well, it sounds like you're admitting it's for political reasons, but you're pretty much agreeing that for the merits of this, there's really not a ton of argument. But um, I don't know. What other are there any other Supreme Court cases, or would you like to just shoot the shit about random stuff now?
We I guess there was like the the transgender sports thing. I mean,
Oh God.
it
All right.
maybe not even worth bringing up, but 6-3, it was decided that what like uh the sanctity of women's sports is now secure. So I guess a man dressed, that dresses as a woman, so like a trans woman cannot compete in women's sports.
Well, if you think about
Broad.
it, the Supreme Court had a duty to protect, the 150 million women from the 13 trans athletes in high school in America. So, honestly, good on them for upholding feminism in its purest form. So, um, of course, I'm kidding.